like we have a lot of more evidences which actually helps us to understand that the natural selection theory was the true. It is pragmatic truth and therefore regarded as a theory despite all the supporting evidence. Now, evidence for evolution from base sequence in DNA or RNA and amino acid sequences in proteins. So let's understand one thing, how the theory of evolution actually works, how the inherited characteristics actually change. So for example, if this is a whole DNA, it is having a lot of sequences on it. It might be A, T, C, G, G, C, or certain more nucleotides. So this is a DNA. Now after some time, what actually happened, due to during the time of replication, or might due to exposure of some UV radiation, or certain thing might have happened, because of which, suppose for example, there are particular sites where certain mutations have taken place, and these particular base pairs, they have changed. Suppose for example, if it was G earlier and now it has been changed to C. Now here, if one A is present, which was earlier T to A transition have taken place, right? And certain condition where suppose it was a C earlier and now it has been changed to T here. So these are certain mutations that have taken place, and they have actually modified the DNA. What will happen, so if the DNA is changed, it and these different mutations will not have taken place at the same time, definitely they'll be very slow. The rate of mutation is very slow. So suppose for example, if this particular mutation took place some 60-70 years back, after 5 to 7 years in the offspring, it was kept on passing on to the offspring. In the offspring, the second mutation have taken place and the same DNA was passed on to the offspring, and after that later on this mutation have taken place. So certain accumulation of these mutations will actually lead to formation of new characteristics. How will that happen? So this particular DNA, what is the function of DNA? It will actually express itself and form mRNA, and mRNA will be later on translated to form a protein. Now these mRNA will also get the same changes or the mutation which are present on the DNA, and actually these particular changes, so for example, if the sequence was AGC here earlier, now it is ACC now. So ACC might code for a different amino acid when compared to AGC. So if this was amino acid 1 and there it is amino acid 2, so a change in amino acid has taken place, and which will actually form amino acid next one and next one. So what will happen, actually from mRNA a protein will form which is made up of amino acids, and due to change in these base pairs, a lot of changes will take place. So for example, if this was ATT earlier and now it has become AAT, so this is a new triplet codon which will actually code for a different amino acid. So suppose this was coding for amino acid 3 earlier, now this will code for amino acid 4, a different amino acid. Okay, so now the protein structure has actually changed, and now these protein, so these amino acid will form the protein. Now these amino acid help the protein in folding and forming different structures. Now if these amino acids have been changed, they will actually fold into a different structure. For example, earlier structure was this. Now due to several such changes in amino acids, a different form of amino acid folding will take place, and this will have a different function. Okay, so it will have a different function. It might form a different kind of enzyme or different type of environment, you can say structural protein. So a different protein has been evolved, a different protein have evolved now, and this protein will actually bring in a lot of changes and lot of certain protein structures. So a lot of, if suppose such many proteins have been developed in a species, so accumulation of these changes will lead to different formations of structures, different morphological features, because of which a new species formation will take place. So if this was the ancestor and this is the this is an individual of which is present today, so it will have different structure and function in its organism when compared to the ancestor, because earlier a different sort of protein was being produced by this DNA, while today a different sort of proteins are being produced. So suppose for example such thousands of mutations will be accumulated in a particular species DNA, and which will actually lead to a lot of changes, and these changes will actually give rise to a different kind of a species with different morphological features, different functions in their cell, different presence of different enzymes which are actually forming new kinds of things, and which will give a different structure to the particular individual. So this will help to understand that how actually evolution take place. So from this ancestor a new individual have actually evolved, and now this ancestor is totally different from this particular individual. There will still be a lot of similarities in them, that you can identify that this particular was the ancestor and this is the newly formed species here. So there will be similarities also, but there will be a lot of differences as well, so that you can differentiate between the two species now. So this is how actually the evolution takes place. So there are changes in DNA first, and these changes in DNA, the mutations actually lead to formation of a RNA, and these RNA actually code for different amino acids. Now a different protein is actually evolved, different proteins are formed, proteins are evolved, and these different proteins actually leads to formation of new species. New functions have evolved in particular species. So let's take a very simple example that we have just seen a few years ago. For example, earlier also COVID like particular viruses were present. So COVID is also an influenza like virus, okay, but certain evolutionary changes or mutation actually were collected in this particular organism, which made it more and more susceptible to infect human beings. Okay, so it was an evolved virus which actually infected a lot of human beings when compared to its ancestor, which was not that susceptible. Okay, so the humans were not actually infected that frequently from the earlier form of this virus, but this virus evolved itself into a new form. A lot of mutations took place inside that virus, and due to which the COVID-19 new virus was formed, and which was actually very much uh, able to infect human beings. Okay, so evidence of evolution also comes from comparing base sequences of the same gene in different species. So in different species you might find same proteins also, but there might be certain changes in small amino acid in them. So the ancestors protein structure might be present in today's species also, but there might be certain changes in the protein, and they might have the same function even today, or their function might get changed also. So it depends on species to species and what kind of mutation is actually taking place. Now none of the two mutations are absolutely same. For example, if this is an individual and this is an individual, they both belong to the same species. So this one had a mutation at this place in the DNA, and this one had a mutation at this place in the DNA. So they both are having mutations at different location. Now if we see them crossing, or if they interbreed with themselves, okay, the crossing will lead to a production of the offspring which will have both the mutation in them. So one of the parents will contribute to this mutation and the other one is contributing to this mutation. So both of the mutations are present in this offspring now. So this way the accumulation of mutation will take place, and which will actually keep on increasing, but the mutations are not very frequent. They will take thousands and thousands of years. So a single mutation generally, it is studied that in a species, if you see a single mutation to actually spread wider spreadly, so it will take many years for the accumulation of such mutations. A clear relationship is seen the more closely related two species are. Its morphology and other traits will be quite similar, and there'll be a fewer differences in both the sequences. So their structure, and if you see their morphology is how they look from outside. So the structures will be quite same, but still there will be certain differences between the both. So if you compare the species which had a ancestor which was long back actually diversified from each other, just like we discussed in the previous class. So for example, if this is an ancestor, okay, from this ancestor, this particular species, so we should not draw it this way, we will draw it this way. So ancestor will be kept on the base, okay, and from this particular ancestor, suppose these two species actually diversified in the beginning, okay, and after that these two species were finally formed. From this species several other species actually evolved, and from this species several other species have evolved. So now uh, if we compare these species, you will find a lot of differences. So if you compare these two species, they will have a lot of similarities between them, but they will also have certain differences. But if you compare this species with this one, so they definitely will have a lot of differences in their internal and external structure and in their morphology. So depending on how long back a common ancestor they shared, both of the species will be similar or distinct from each other depending on that particular factor. Okay, so now this trend is difficult to explain without evolution. It is convincingly explained that by the theory that species develop over time. It takes you can say thousands or lakhs of years or millions of years, gradually diverging from a common ancestor as a result of differences in natural selection. So in addition to observed combination and differences, there are only easily accounted for repeated splitting of ancestral species by evolution. So this way, repeated splitting will take place and more species will be developed from these species also. And this is how today's ecosystem is formed, where you can say thousands and lakhs of different species are available, starting from lower organisms to higher organisms and plants and animals, and including all of them, you can say thousands and lakhs of species are available on earth today. That is all due to, the credit goes to evolution. Okay, in this way a cladogram based on sequence differences usually match closely with classifications based on morphology. So students, what are cladograms? So just this tree that I drew, which is actually showing the connection between the ancestors and the particular, you can say, offspring. So this particular tree is called as a cladogram. Okay, this is called as a cladogram, which shows connection of ancestors and it's the newly evolved species. So these connection can be understood easily using a cladogram. So we can understand that from, so for example, if ancestor is considered A and this is P and this is Q, so we can actually identify that these are actually diversified at what stage and how many ancestors are present in between while they reached up to this stage. So they might have taken millions of years from evolution that started from A and reach it up to P. It might have taken millions of years for this evolution to take place inside the species. So evidences of evolution also comes from gene families that occurs across diverse group of organisms. So here an interesting example of Hox gene family is given, which is a widely distributed genome family. Now it might not be same in most of the species, but the higher organism, they all have Hox gene family, which actually help them in development. So you can say the developmental biology of a particular organism is actually controlled by these Hox genes. So similarity between Hox genes can be reasonably explained by a common ancestry. So most of the species, so if you consider Drosophila development, it is also controlled by Hox genes. And if you see development of human beings, that is also controlled by Hox genes. So this definitely shows that there is a common ancestry from which actually these particular organisms have evolved. So for example, if this ancestor had Hox genes, okay, so the form of Hox genes might have changed. In Q also there are certain Hox genes that are actually helping in organization, or you can say development of the organism. And here in species P also, a different family of Hox genes is responsible for development of this particular organism. But Hox genes are present in all of them. That shows there is a common ancestry, that the ancestor had some Hox genes, and certain modification in these Hox genes have led to development of certain different species. So here, with duplication to give multiple copies of the gene, so there might be gradual modification in these Hox genes. They might have different functions in different lineages. So Hox genes occur in Cnidaria in on animals with a clear head to tail axis. So in you can say insects it is present, including annelids and you can say arthropods and vertebrates. So all these groups, they all have Hox genes. So these species form a clade known as Bilateria. So this particular family, this shows they have a bilateral structure. So starting from head to tail, they will have different parts, and they will be developed accordingly. So here in Drosophila we can see the color of the particular Hox gene shows which part it is developing in the particular organism. So this light green color, we can see this particular part is developed. From this dark green part, this particular structure is developed. From the purple part, this particular head part is developed. From the light blue color, the frontal legs are developed. And from this part, this particular central part is developed. From pink, this particular part is developed. From this green, this part is developed. And from blue, this tail part is developed. So all these 8 Hox genes are responsible for development of complete Drosophila. Similarly, in human beings also, the Hox genes are present, okay, which helps in development of humans as well. So in humans also certain Hox genes are present, and which are greater in number. They are not exactly 8, they might be more in number. Okay, somewhere it might have been given. So approximately I guess 23 or so Hox genes are involved in development of human beings. Hox genes occurs. Okay, fine. So let's see this DBQ, what is given here. After a clade splits, it can be divergence of the base and amino acid sequences of the separated clades. The more time has passed since the split, the more differences we expect due to this evolution. So for example, this is a clade in which this is a common ancestor, and from this common ancestor, first of all, 2 species have been split, and they developed Q and R, and from these 2 species multiple different species have actually evolved. Now we can see that D and E are closer to each other if we compare E and A also. So this way the clade will help in understanding the evolutionary mechanism and which particular species are close to each other and which one are farther away from each other. So with the help of this particular clade, we can also understand how A is very different from Z, because their ancestor was a very you can say far back they had a common ancestor. So the more earlier the ancestor was present, they will have more and more differences. So this evolution might have taken say thousands of years from P to Q. From P to A, it might have taken thousands and millions of years to reach up to this stage. So it in the course of time, different mutations actually accumulate in the DNA, which actually results in formation of different amino acids and different morphological and structural features in species, and which actually helps in formation of or evolution of new species here. So figure 5 shows a theoretical cladogram with a common ancestor P that's split into to produce 2 ancestral clades Q and R, which are then split repeatedly to form human multiple clades. So these are multiple clades. So what are the multiple clades here? So if we see this whole as a cladogram, so this is one clade. So if we consider, suppose for example, if I want to take out a small clade here, so here if I take only this much part, then here also we have a common ancestor and 2 different species that are actually evolved from it. So this can also be called as a small cladogram. Okay, so this whole big thing is also a cladogram, which includes the ancestor and its offspring. And this particular small part can also be called as a cladogram, which includes its common ancestor and its offspring, all the offsprings here. Okay, so let's the hypothesis that there is ancestral convergence in sequences. So ancestral convergence in sequences were tested using two plant clades, which is monocots and eudicots. So monocots and dicots, definitely they have a similar common ancestor. The amino acid sequence of 51 proteins and 24 species of monocots and 44 species of eudicots were compared. So if you compare the protein structures, you'll be able to differentiate. The more the same amino acid sequence is present, the species are close to each other. They have a common ancestor which is very close to them. Okay, but if the protein structures are very much different from each other, so that means that they are actually separated very very long back, and they have a common ancestor which was a long time back they had a common ancestor. So the observed pattern of sequence differences being due to anything other than evolution was calculated at this. So this is a very very you can say small or minimal chance. So other than evolution, the other factor that might have brought the evolutionary process to take place is almost negligible. You can say, okay, negligible. So let's see the questions. Explain how the most probable base sequence of ancestor P and ancestor Q can be determined. So students here, they both can be determined with the help of, you can say, so if I want to consider this particular analysis, so forming a cladogram can help in understanding the probable base sequences. So if I am if I am comparing different species for a certain protein structures, the more the number of proteins are similar in their structure, the more closer they are. So similarly, I'll form this cladogram. This can be formed using this particular data, and this can help us understand that how much close P and Q are. So this definitely must have showed that P and Q share a lot of same protein structures. That is why they are very close to each other in this cladogram. And if we compare this P with this A, they are very farther away from each other. So that shows that they definitely must have had a lot of differences in their protein structures, because of which they are kept this far away from each other. So using this data, comparing the proteins, comparing the DNA, comparing the RNA, we can form these cladograms, and we can understand the connection between different species. So this is how it is helpful. The cladograms are helpful. So the answer to this will be by forming a cladogram. Discuss whether more base sequences differences are expected between clade E and clade V. So clade E and clade V, so they both have a common ancestor that is farther away, and the recent ancestor is actually not the same in both of them. So they both will definitely have a lot of differences between them. Okay, so they'll be very very far away from each other if you compare them. But if you compare Q and R, okay, if you compare, okay, we have to compare E and clade V, or between ancestor P and ancestor Q. So ancestor P and Q are very very close. So the P is actually the just you can say the closest ancestor of Q. So definitely they'll have a lot of similarities. So they will have a lot of similarities. So if you you can easily answer this one, that definitely E and V will have a lot of differences when compared to P and Q. P and Q will have a lot of similarities between them. Okay. Next is explain the reason for using data for multiple species and multiple proteins. So this will actually help in comparative analysis, that how much close or far away certain plant species are from each other by drawing this cladogram from the data that we receive. The more the similarities are, for example, A and B, they are actually definitely they both must have similar protein and you can say we are comparing between species and proteins. So these species, they must have similar protein structures, so that is why they are kept very close to each other, while this particular and this one must have more differences when compared to these two. They both are more similar, and they both are a little bit more separate from each other. They have a little bit more differences, that is why they're kept in a separate line from each other. But if we compare from this particular part and this particular part, the particular offspring of Q and R, if you compare them, then there'll be a lot of differences, even more differences. So depending on that, we can actually draw this particular diagram, and this will help us to understand how much far or close two species are if we see in aspect of their common ancestor. So there are 10 to the power 80 protons in the universe. What is the chance of picking the same proton at a random twice in a row? So if there are this many protons in the universe, what is the chance of picking? So the chance of picking the first one will be 1 into 10 to the power minus 80. So this will be a very small chance. And picking of the same thing again, so there are chances, but the chances are really, really smaller. So again, coming of the same thing, the chances are very, very rare. Okay, picking the same proton at random twice in a row, so the chances are very, very less. The picking of a particular proton, and then if you particularly name the proton, then the first proton's coming chance will be this, and the second time the same repeated will be multiplied by this same number. But here it is asked randomly, if any particular proton has come, what is the chance that the second time also the same randomly the same particular proton comes or it gets selected? So the chances will be this many, okay, in this particular case. So let's see the next one. Okay, same proton, the random twice in a row. The research is free to access online. So here you can see the last part that is given, that the chances of evolution is this many, other than evolution. Okay, so the chances are negligible that anything else might have led to formation of new species compared to evolution. So the most but still you can say that it's not exactly zero chance. There is still a chance, although it is negligible, but still there is a chance here. Similarly here also, you can't say that it is impossible. There is still a chance, but the chance is very, very negligible. The research is free to access online. Okay, it's called Beyond Reasonable Doubt: Evolution from DNA Sequences. So discuss whether this is a suitable name. So beyond if something that is like most probably happening, if you're sure that this is going to happen, so we do not have a doubt about it. But if you talk about changes in DNA, okay, evolution from DNA sequence, it is beyond reasonable doubt, because for example, the chances of evolution from anything else is negligible, this many small. So evolution from DNA sequences is definitely a beyond reasonable doubt. So it is undoubted that evolution is a process that takes place due to changes in the DNA sequences. So this is a very, very suitable name according to me. So students, that is all for this session, and we'll continue the chapter in the next session.